kingdom shattered by a bullet in the dark. Rulers come and rulers go. Will our kingdom fall apart? Who shall we now turn to when our leaders lost their heart? Lives are lost, but at what cost will the grand dream fall apart? Killed by his own or by his foes, turn the tide. 300 years, still no one knows. The secret remains. Broken, grief so grand, sing of his final stand. Long live Carolus, brought by soldier's hand, back to the fatherland. Long live Carolus Rex. Brought him back to Sweden, where we put him in a chest. Years of war and agony, now the king can finally rest. What will be uncovered from this cold November night? Fredrikshavn, what happened there? Will it ever come to light? Killed by his own or by his foes, turn the tide. 300 years, still no one knows. The secret remains. Broken, grief so grand, sing of his final stand. Long live Carolus, brought by soldier's hand, back to the fatherland. Long live Carolus Rex.
Welcome to Central Happenings Network. And I'm your host, Bellagio Sampler. And welcome to the show. A lot has happened today. A lot of good, a lot of bad. But here we are. Here all the chips get laid out on the table. YouTube at any point could shut off the live chat, could end the stream, because we are living in full totalitarianism. A lot of people aren't looking at this in the broad spectrum of happenings. What is going on? I'm reading everyone's comments. William O'Brien, don't believe the hype. Gary Maricano, Crusader Sand, Cooled Star 69, Punish Madison, Vera Thrust, Jose Martinez, Ghost of Niccolo. There will be various perspectives on tonight's show. Let's get into the bunker. We got to put some cool, calming music on. Because first and foremost, we're going to put on a little bit of Congress here and there. Some historic stuff is happening, but let me give you the pretext of this. What happened today was engineered on round tables, in think tanks, deep inside skyscrapers, deep inside board meetings, underground, around military committees. Today was engineered. How? By bottling up the American people's emotions, by taking away their jobs, by limiting their money, by dangling a $2,000 stipend in front of their face like a carrot on a stick for a donkey, and then creating patsies and fake events like the Nancy Pelosi spray painting and the pig head. They are building up this air of civil war. And now they are painting Trump supporters as domestic terrorists. Pretty interesting. Let's get in here real quick. I'm going to be in and out of talking. This is historic.
A little bit of a different feel.
We appreciate in this moment our obligation to the Constitution, our obligation to the democracy, our obligation to the Republic. There are people in this chamber that have twisted the words of a statute written in the 19th century that was meant to actually settle our electoral disputes, to leave them with the states. As the senator from Utah was saying, to give us a ministerial role, except in very rare circumstances. That's what that law is about, that the senator of Texas was talking about today. And that's the law that's leading us to be asked to overturn the judgments of 60 courts in America.
As you listen, I'm going to go over some of the news for tonight.
Some of whom have howled the president's lawyers out of the courtrooms because there's no evidence of fraud. And by the way, the fact that 37% or 39% of Americans think there's no evidence of fraud or think there's evidence of fraud does not mean there is fraud. If you turned a blind eye to a conspiracy theory, you can't now come to the floor of the Senate and say you're ignoring the people who believe the election was stolen. Go out there and tell them the truth, which is that every single member of this Senate knows this election wasn't stolen. And that we, just as in the Roman Republic, have a responsibility to protect the independence of the judiciary from politicians who will stop at nothing to hold on to power. There's nothing new about that either. That's been true since the First Republic was founded. So now we find ourselves in a position just days after many senators here swore an oath to uphold and defend the Constitution. Every single member of the House of Representatives swore the same oath as well. And I think we've got a solemn obligation and responsibility here to prove once again that this country is a nation of laws and not of men. And the only result that we can reach together is one that rejects the claim of the senator from Texas and the other members of the House and Senate who seek to overturn the decisions that are made by the states, by the voters in the states, and by the courts. If we follow what they have proposed, we will be the ones that will have disenfranchised every single person who cast a vote in this election.
If Trump goes live, somebody has to link it for us. Cole Wheeler, awesome information if that's true.
Whether they voted for the president or they didn't, I urge you to reject this, and I deeply appreciate the opportunity to serve with every single one of you. Thank you, Mr. President.
Majority Leader.
I yield up to 5 minutes to the Senator from Georgia, Senator Loeffler.
Senator from Georgia.
Mr. President, when I arrived in Washington this morning, I fully intended to object to the certification of the electoral votes. However, the events that have transpired today have forced me to reconsider, and I cannot now in good conscience object to the certification of these electors. The violence, the lawlessness, and siege of the halls of Congress are abhorrent and stand as a direct attack on the very
she's a
institution
traitor.
my objection was intended to protect, the sanctity of the American democratic process. And I thank law enforcement for keeping us safe. I believe that there were last-minute changes to the November 2020 election process and serious irregularities that resulted in too many Americans losing confidence not only in the integrity of our elections, but in the power of the ballot as a tool of democracy. Too many Americans are frustrated at what they see as an unfair system. Nevertheless, there is no excuse for the events that took place in these chambers today, and I pray that America never suffers such a dark day again. Though the fate of this vote is clear, the future of the American people's faith in the core institution of this democracy remains uncertain. We as a body must turn our focus to protecting the integrity of our elections and restoring every American's faith that their voice and their vote matters. America is a divided country with serious differences, but it is still the greatest country on earth. There can be no disagreement that upholding democracy is the only path to preserving our republic. I yield the floor.
I don't get what she just said. Is she for or against objecting?
Democratic Leader.
Minutes to Senator Booker and 2.5 minutes to Senator Kaine. In reverse order.
Mr. President and my colleagues,
Senator from Virginia.
I applaud the comments of my colleague from Georgia deeply.
She
My
was a
first
traitor.
job after school was in Macon, Georgia, working for a federal judge, Lanier Anderson. And I learned a lot about integrity and a lot about law from him. I also learned some sad lessons that in the
There's not one person in this entire room with integrity.
history of Georgia, and indeed Virginia and many states, so many people, especially people of color, have been disenfranchised over the course of our history. Our late friend, John Lewis, congressman from Georgia, was savagely beaten on Bloody Sunday just for marching for voting rights. That act of violence inspired this body, the U.S. Senate, to come together in March of 1965 and work to pass, in a bipartisan fashion, the Voting Rights Act. We should be coming together today after acts of violence.
Yeah, Jim Jordan is good.
As a United
Is Jim Jordan in here? I thought he was in the earlier one.
States Senate to affirm the votes of all who cast ballots in November. Instead, we're contemplating an unprecedented objection that would be a massive disenfranchisement of American voters. The Georgia result was very clear, a 12,000 vote margin, 2 certifications by Republican officials, 4 separate recounts and canvasses, 7 lawsuits, as in the other states. If we object to results like this, the message is so clear. We are saying to states, no matter how secure and accurate your elections are, we'll gladly overthrow them if we don't like who you voted for. But more importantly, what we'll be saying, really what we'll be doing, is as the body that acted together to guarantee Americans the right to vote, we will become the agent of one of the most massive disenfranchisements in the history of this country. So I urge all of my colleagues, please oppose these objections. Thank you, and I yield to my colleague from New Jersey.
Senator from New Jersey.
Mr. Vice President, I can only think of 2 times in American history that individuals laid siege to our Capitol, stormed our sacred civic spaces, and tried to upend and overrun
This guy.
this government.
This clown.
One was in the War of 1812, and the other one was today. What's interesting about the parallel between the two is they both were waving flags.
Notice how these guys are acting like they're the victims. Notice how Congress is the victim, Senate's the victim. Not the American people is the victim. Not the people that lost their jobs, the people that lost their businesses.
To a sole sovereign, to an individual, surrendering democratic principles to the cult of personality. One was a monarch in England, and the other were the flags I saw all over our Capitol, including in the hallways and in this room, to a single person named Donald Trump. The sad difference between these 2 times is one was yet another nation in the history of our country that tried to challenge the United States of America. But this time, we brought this hell upon ourselves. My colleague from Texas said that this was a moment
This
where
is longer than 2.5 minutes.
there were
I thought they each get
unprecedented
2.5
allegations
minutes.
of voter fraud. Yes, that is true. They were unprecedented when the president, before the election even happened, said, if I lose this election, then the election was rigged. That's unprecedented. It's unprecedented before the night of the voting even
He's going to start crying on air, this
was
guy.
even done, that he called it rigged. And it's unprecedented that he is fanning the flames of conspiracy theory to create a smokescreen in this nation to cover what he is trying to do, which is undermine our democratic principles. But it's not just that. The shame of this day is it's being aided and abetted by good Americans who are falling prey, who are choosing Trump over truth, who are surrendering to the passion of lies as opposed to standing up and speaking truth to power, who are trying to fundraise off of the shame of conspiracy theories as opposed to doing the incalculably valuable, patriotic thing to speak truth to our nation. Our democracy is wounded, and I saw it when I saw pictures of yet another insurgency, of a flag of another group of Americans who tried to challenge our nation. I saw the flag of the Confederacy there.
Pelosi today let more Republicans object and speak than Pence. So far, Pence hasn't. Have we heard any people that are objecting from Pence?
What will we do? How will we confront this shame? How will we confront this dark second time in American history? I pray that we remember a Georgian. And his words, all I can say is we must in spirit join together like those Georgians on a bridge called the Edmund Pettus, who joined hands, who were called threats to our democracy, who were called outrageous epithets when they sought to expand our democracy, to save it and to heal it, when they joined arm in arm and said what we should say now, commit ourselves to that ideal, that together we shall overcome.
Wasn't this guy on Mad TV?
Majority Leader.
Mr. President, I yield up to 5 minutes.
This guy
Senator
is a
from
traitor.
Nebraska, Senator Sass.
Senator from Nebraska.
Mr. President, thank you. And Mr. Vice President, let me just say
Please.
before I begin,
Be a patriot.
thank you for the way you have fulfilled your constitutional duties and your oath of office today. It obviously hasn't been easy. Colleagues, today has been ugly. And when I came to the floor this morning, I planned to talk about the lesson of 1801, because I'm kind of a history nerd. And I wanted to celebrate the glories of the peaceful transition of power across our nation's history. feels a little naive now to talk about ways that American civics might be something that could unite us and bring us back together. 1801 blew everybody's mind all over the world, by the way. John Adams loses to Thomas Jefferson, and Adams willingly leaves the executive mansion and moves back to Massachusetts, and Jefferson peacefully assumes power, and people all over Europe.
This is the most historic day in the nation, the people, since the beginning of America. Unprecedented times. And all you care about is why you are not a mod anymore on the channel. That's exactly why you're not a mod anymore for the channel. Because it's not about you.
Said those must be fake news.
And learn some
those
history.
Must be bad reports. There's no way any executive would ever willingly lay down power. And yet Adams, in defeat,
we're moving to D-Live and Twitch anyway.
All of us
Get with the
gift.
program.
I wanted to celebrate
YouTube
that.
is done.
And it feels a little bit harder now. This building has been desecrated. Blood has been spilled in the hallways. I was with octogenarian members of this chamber that needed to have troops and police stabilize them to get down the stairs at a time when a lot of our staffs were panicked and under their desks and not knowing what was going to happen to them. It was ugly today. But you know what? It turns out that when something's ugly, talking about beauty isn't just permissible. Talking about beauty is obligatory in a time like that. Why? Why would we talk about beauty after the ugliness of today? Because our kids need to know that this isn't what America is. What happened today isn't what America is. They've been given a glorious inheritance.
So you guys understand the script. Before the storming of the Capitol Hill, whatever e-celebs were in charge of that, or fake Antifa wrapped up in MAGA clothing, before Nancy Pelosi was getting her butt handed to her, and there was constant objections, Lauren Boebert literally teared into them. Historic speech. And then the protesters came, the rioters came, shut it down, and now the whole script's different. Now they can't believe it.
Election,
they can't believe this happened.
And if the president pro tem was, I'd have made something to do together. The way we reaffirm our constitutional system, where we've got some governmental tasks, and we all in this body could do better at those governmental tasks, but the heart of America is not government. The center of America is not Washington, D.C. The center of America is the neighborhoods where 330 million Americans are raising their kids and trying to put food on the table and trying to love their neighbor. That's the center of America.
Is this guy,
We're not supposed to be the most important people in America.
Sassy?
We're supposed to be servant leaders who try to maintain a framework for ordered liberty so that there's a structure that back home where they live,
we haven't heard one objection yet after this. They reconvened.
Order to the golden apple at the center, as Washington would have said it, which is the things that they build together. The places where they coach Little League, the places where they invite people to synagogue or church. Sometimes the big things we do together are governmental, like kicking Hitler's ass or like going to the moon. Sometimes there is governmental stuff, but the heart of America is about places where moms and dads are raising kids, and we're supposed to serve them by maintaining order and by rejecting violence. You can't do big things like that if you hate your neighbors. You can't do big things together as Americans if you think other Americans are the enemy. Look, there's a lot of uncertainty about the future. I get it. There's a lot that does need to be rebuilt. But if you're angry, I want to beg you, don't let the screamers who monetize hate have the final word.
Monetizing
Don't
hate.
let nihilists become your drug dealers. There are some who want to burn it all down. We met some of them today, but they aren't going to win. Don't let them be your prophets. Instead, organize, persuade, but most importantly, love your neighbor. Visit the widower down the street who's lonely and doesn't want to tell anybody that his wife died and he doesn't have a lot of friends. Shovel somebody's neighbor. Shovel somebody's driveway.
Shovel
you can't hate
neighbor.
somebody who just shoveled your driveway. The heart of life is about community and neighborhood, and we're supposed to be servant leaders. The constitutional system is still the greatest order for any government ever, and it's our job to steward it and protect it. Let's remember that today when we vote.
Democratic leader.
Come on, man. Where's the objections?
Senator from Illinois.
All the good speeches were today before the protest. This is crazy.
In March of 1861, Springfield lawyer caught a train to Washington. His name was Abraham Lincoln. It wasn't his first trip here. He'd served as a congressman 15 years before, and he returned in the beginning of the Civil War to serve as president.
Eric Parks gets it. Funny how all these speeches are lined up for the finale, right?
In 15 years, it had changed a lot. The Spriggs boarding house across the street, which is now the Library of Congress, was gone. And this building was changing.
This guy's talking about when he first became a senator over 120 years ago. When there were apple orchards outside the White House, the Pentagon wasn't built yet. You hear these stories this old bastard's, telling?
Big changes. They're building a dome on the Capitol.
They're building a dome. We never even seen domes in America. This was back before domes were even brought to America.
But they were also in the earliest days of a war, and President Lincoln was counseled, stop.
This guy was Senator Page for President Lincoln.
Building the dome. Costs too much money, and we can't spend any more time on it. And he said, no, we're going to build that dome and we're going to finish it. That dome and this building will be a symbol of this.
What happened today paints all Trump supporters as domestic terrorists, and it can be used against us if Biden were to bring in, let's just say, 500,000 Chinese peacekeepers.
That will survive this civil war and come back strong. So they built the dome. They won the war. And since those days, that dome and this building have been a symbol to this country, a symbol of unity and of hope. Tourists come through here before COVID-19 by the tens of thousands.
What are they flashing on the screen?
If you've ever noticed their tours,
what is that shit?
They're often shushed. People are saying,
show some respect
for this building. We know this building in the Rotunda as a place where some of the greatest American heroes of both political parties lie in state, and we go there to honor them. We know this building because we work here. We enact laws here that change America. We gather for State of the Union messages from presidents and honor the people in the gallery. This is a special
Gary
place.
Americano, you're right.
This is a sacred place.
They let him in.
But this sacred place was desecrated by a mob today.
Oh, here we go.
On our watch. This temple to democracy was defiled by thugs who roamed the halls and sat in that chair, Mr. Vice President, the one that you vacated at 2:15 this afternoon, sat and posed for pictures, those who were roaming around this chamber.
So listen, the precedent is set here that Antifa, Black Lives Matter, they could destroy cities, they can occupy cities, they could take over vast regions, they could shut down businesses, they could destroy businesses. That's fine. No one bats an eye, right? But somebody sat in that very sacred chair up there, Mr. Vice President. God forbid, damn them, let them be cursed for eternity. These evil degenerates, they've defiled our temple of democracy.
What brought this on?
What brought this on? It couldn't have been us.
Mob spring spontaneously from America? No. This mob was invited to come to Washington on this day by this president for one reason, because he knew the Electoral College vote was going to be counted this day. He wanted this mob to disrupt the constitutional process which we are part of. This mob was inspired by a president who cannot accept defeat. If you wonder whether I'm going too far in what I say, just read the transcript with the Secretary of State.
If you wonder if I'm going too far in what I say, just look back to my speech in 1813 when I told a young colored boy who worked for me on the plantation to please settle down before supper. Back when Martha was on the plantation. And that was a little out of line, Congress. But what I say today to the American people.
From Georgia. And listen to this president's wild conspiracy theories, one after the other, swatted down by that Republican elected official and his attorney as having no basis in fact. This president begs, he coaxes, he He even threatens that Secretary of State to find the votes he needs. In any other venue, that would be a simple, obvious crime. The lengths he will go to are obvious. The Texas senator says to us, well, many
This
people
guy,
still agree with
even
him,
with
you
me
know,
adding to it.
when it gets
This is
down
like a
to the bottom
15-minute
line.
speech.
Many people have fallen for this presidential position that it must have been a rigged election if I lost. Well, I would say that after we've lost count, 57 lawsuits, 62 lawsuits, I've heard so many numbers, after 90 different judges, after this president took his case, the best he could put together, to the highest court in the land across the street,
What is
where
Trump
he
gonna
has
do?
personally chosen 3 justices on the Supreme Court.
Wario DS over on DLive is asking, are they using Common Core to measure the times of these
I
speeches?
say to the senator from Texas, you know
Honestly,
much more
like,
about
this
that
is-
court than I do. I don't believe they let that paper that he sent up there even hit the desk before they laughed it out of the court. And that's the best he had to offer. No evidence whatsoever of this rigged election and this fraudulence. The senator from Texas says, we just want to create a little commission. 10 days, we're going to audit all the states, particularly the ones in contention.
Actually, to restore orders that we get back to the electoral certification process. During my 29-year career as an obstetrician and gynecologist, too often I had to sit down with patients and give them a very bad diagnosis. It might have been a young mother of 3 who I delivered all 3 of her babies, now with metastatic breast cancer, or perhaps another woman with advanced cervical or ovarian cancer, all with a very challenging prognosis. But before I sat down with each one of those patients, I carefully reviewed all their labs, their x-rays, and their pathology to make sure I had the facts straight. But at the end of the day, my final recommendation was always going to be...
Let's see if this guy is still streaming.
By the way, let's talk about curfews.
This guy's streaming on the scene, various things. Austin Zone. There's a lot of protests going on all throughout the night. People all around the country. Millennial Millie, this is her box here. Millennial Millie's box right now is being probed and infiltrated by, looks like, a bunch of angry men. We'll go back there. Let's look at a couple tweets real quick. Lindsey Graham. We all know how much of a patriot this guy is, right? This guy bleeds red, white, and blue. I could not agree more with President-elect Biden's statement to the nation. Time to retake the Capitol, end the violence, and stop the madness. Time to move forward in governing our nation. Our differences are real, but the love of our nation overwhelms our differences. Thank you, Lindsey Graham. Steve Mnuchin earlier today, 10 o'clock, says he's on his way to Israel now for important meetings, ... Is our guy Mnuchin telling us some insider secrets? Someone made an album cover for the American Civil War 2.0. Pretty wonky stuff. And then we have this Q post. We're going to look into this Q post in a little bit. I have it pulled up over here. This came out last year. Okay. I'm trying to see if it's European, if it's April 6th, or if it's June 4th. But it's something. Came out back then. And it's happening now. Very interesting. Red 1, POTUS, Twitter removal. 2, Central Communications blackout. 3, class movement, Pelosi or Pence. 4, movement of mill assets under the guise of a citizen riot control. Very interesting. That also ties to current events. National military centralization. I don't know what this would stand for. Maybe we have some military anons in chat. Yes, Fargoth. We saw the 300 million get. It was Christ is King, right? The 300 millionth post of poll was Christ is King. And so many anti-Christian threads going because they know that's where the power is. They're trying their best to quelch it, but they can't. So the USS Castle Rock, is that like a nuclear submarine? Is that an aircraft carrier? Do we know what that is? This is very interesting. Let's hop back over to the live stream. But this picture we're going to tie into POTUS Twitter removal. Right here, they removed his Twitter, shut him down for 12 hours as of an hour ago. We don't know the number 2 yet. Communications blackout has not occurred. I'm still live, so that's good. We can still play Tarkov. Class movement Pelosi or Pence. Mike Pence and Nancy Pelosi ushered out of joint session as protesters gain entry into the Capitol. Number 4 is movement of military assets. Heavily armed FBI spies enter the U.S. Capitol. I don't know if that correlates. I'm talking about full-on military battalions. And statement by Acting Secretary Miller on full activation of D.C. National Guard. And they're talking about doing that. Let's get back to the proceeding and watch history.
Be a recommendation.
Trump-appointed judge.
Here we go.
Even Trump's attorney general.
Guys, I'm telling you, I was watching before the protests. I don't know if you were, but it was legendary. It was, one after another. Jim Jordan, Lauren Boebert, the new congressman out of Colorado. Amazing stuff. She tore into this fraud.
Admitted that the United States Department of Justice had not found widespread fraud that would have affected the outcome. Yet still, many of my Republican colleagues are asking us to ignore all of that.
Rock.
With no evidence of their own, they're asking us to ignore court rulings, ignore Republican election officials, and even worse, ignore the will of the people across this vast, great nation. By trying to overturn this election, they are placing more trust in Reddit conspiracy theories over the Constitution.
I wish you said 4chan.
That appeasing Trump is more important to them than protecting the most basic tenet of our republic, the adherence to free and fair elections. There's one thing I know.
She just shook her head.
It's that my troops didn't sign up to defend our democracy in war zones thousands of miles away, only to watch it crumble in these hallowed halls here at home. Yet that is what this effort amounts to, an attempt to subvert our democracy, and in the process, it is threatening what makes America
Did Trump go live? Anyone know if Trump's going live?
Because in this country, the power of the people has always mattered more than the people in power. That is the ideal that this nation was founded upon. That is why a few patriots threw some tea in Boston Harbor, why Washington crossed the Delaware, why suffragists were arrested a century ago, and why my friend John Lewis crossed that bridge in Selma in 1965. It is why millions spent a Tuesday in November standing in line, braving a pandemic to make their voices heard. Listen, this administration has always had an adversarial relationship with the truth. Trump always cries conspiracy, always foments chaos whenever something doesn't go his way. But today, we here in this chamber have the opportunity to prove that here in this country, truth matters, that right matters, that the will of the people matters more than the whims of any single powerful individual. I have no tea to throw in Boston Harbor tonight. And I regret
what poetic.
That I have no rucksack to pack for my country. No Black Hawk to pilot.
What is she skipping parts of her speech?
Nor am I asking for any grand gesture from my Republican colleagues. All that I'm asking of you is to reflect on the oaths that you have sworn, on the damage done to our union today, and on the sacrifices made by those who've given so much to this nation. From the service members at Fort Huachuca and Marine Corps Air Station to Yuma, to the marchers who bent America.
Wait for her to be done, then. We see what's next. Here we go. I was going to give you a rundown. Let's see. I still might. Who's next? Somebody real?
Mr. President, I yield up to 5 minutes to the senator from Kentucky, Senator Paul.
Senator from
thank
Kentucky.
God. Is this
I
going
wrote
to
a speech for today. I was planning to say that I fear the chaos of establishing a precedent that Congress can overturn elections. Boy, was I right. Chaos, anarchy. The violence today was wrong and un-American. The vote we are about to cast is incredibly important. Now more than ever, the question is, should Congress override the certified results from the states and nullify the states' rights to conduct elections? The vote today is not a protest. The vote today is literally to overturn elections. We've been told that this is a protest, or this is about an electoral commission. No, it's not. It's about whether to seat the electors that have been certified by a state. It's not about an electoral commission. It's not about a protest. You can go outside if you want to protest. This is about overturning a state-certified election.
This is why Trump's going to make a new party.
These elections, wouldn't it be the opposite of what states' rights Republicans have always advocated for? This would doom the Electoral College forever. It was never intended by our founders that Congress have the power to overturn state-certified elections. My oath to the Constitution doesn't allow me to disobey the law. I can't vote to overturn the verdict of states. Such a vote would be to overturn everything held dear by those of us who support the rights of states in this great system of federalism that was bequeathed to us by our founders. The Electoral College was created,
you're probably right,
to devolve the power of selecting presidential electors.
This is why Trump is going to make his own party and or activate the military.
Friend to those who believe that every American across our vast country deserves to be heard. If Congress were to give the power to overturn the state's election, what terrible chaos would ensue every 4 years? Imagine the furor against the Electoral College if Congress becomes a forum to overturn states' Electoral College slates.
Like Hitler?
It's one thing to be angry. It's another to focus one's anger in constructive ways. That hasn't happened today, to say the least. We simply cannot destroy the Constitution, our laws, and the Electoral College in the process. I hope as the nation's anger cools, we can channel that energy into essential electoral reforms at the state level. America's admired around the world for our free elections. We absolutely must fix this mess and restore confidence and integrity to our elections. We must.
What was that?
Democratic leader.
The son of Ron Paul?
Senator from Virginia.
Fell far from the tree.
Mr. President, I think like most of us, I'm still pretty reeling from what happened today.
Here we
what
go.
I was going to talk
guys,
about was...
If you have any doubt that today was organic or natural, it wasn't. It was completely coaxed, agitated, coerced. The crowd was pushed, prodded, and forced into this position with paid agitators and e-celeb actors that went in there to cause this mess right when all the good speeches were happening.
The working results of our elections. Because when you do so, you often carry out the goals of our foreign adversaries. Use caution because whether knowingly or unknowingly,
please donate to my crypto accounts down below. Links in description. I have not invested in crypto yet. I'm waiting for you guys to help me invest in crypto.
Knowingly. And whether that adversary is in Russia or China or Iran, their goals are pretty simple. They want to make it appear to Americans, to folks around the world, to their own people, that there's nothing special about American democracy. I was going to try in a feeble way to maybe reach some of the rhetorical heights of Ben Sass, and I knew I couldn't do that. So instead,
someone's sucking Ben Sass's.
Today's the day for violating rules. This is a photo that appears today on one of the most prominent German newspapers. You don't need to draw up it. You can draw up photos from any newspaper or any television feed anywhere across the world. And what is this photo of? It's of thugs. Thugs in the halls of this capital, diminishing everything we say we believe in this democracy. And when you look at those images, realize those images are priceless for our adversaries. God willing, tonight, in an overwhelming way, we're going to take a small step in a bipartisan way to start restoring that trust of our people and hopefully the billions of people around the world who believe in that notion of American democracy. Remember, these
I don't know.
images
Are they going to let the people that spoke today speak again?
still endure.
I don't know.
I yield back.
I'm just waiting to hear one.
Mr. President, I yield up to 5 minutes to the senator from Missouri, Senator Hawley.
Senator from Missouri.
Please be based.
Thank you.
Please.
I want to begin this evening by saying thank you to the men and women of the Capitol Hill Police, the armed, the National Guardsmen, the Metropolitan Police, and others who came to this Capitol, who put their lives on the line to protect everyone here working inside of it. And I want to thank law enforcement all across this country, in my home state of Missouri and everywhere else, who do that day in and day out. And I just want to acknowledge that when it comes to violence, this has been a terrible year in America this last year. We've seen a lot of violence against law enforcement, and today we saw it here in the capital of the United States. And in this country, in the United States of America, we cannot say emphatically enough, violence is not how you achieve change. Violence is not how you achieve something better. Our Constitution was built and put into place so that there would be, in the words of Abraham Lincoln, no appeal from ballots to bullets, which is what we saw, unfortunately, attempted tonight. There is no place for that in the United States of America. And that's why I submit to my colleagues that what we're doing here tonight is actually very important.
Staged event.
Because for those who have concerns about the integrity of our elections, those who have concerns about what happened in November, this is the appropriate means. This is the lawful place where those objections and concerns should be heard. This is the forum that the law provides for, our laws provide for those concerns to be registered, not through violence, not by appealing from ballots to bullets, but here in this lawful process. And so to those who say that this is just a formality today, an antique ceremony that we've engaged in for a couple of hundred years, I can't say that I agree. I can't say that our precedents
This guy is blinking normal.
that. I actually think it's very
and
vital
Mitt Romney
that we
is
do.
blinking
The
abnormal.
opportunity to be heard, to register objections is very vital, because this is the place where those objections are to be heard and dealt with, debated, and finally resolved in this lawful means, peacefully, without violence, without attacks, without bullets. And so, Mr. President, let me just say now briefly, in lieu of speaking about it later, a word about Pennsylvania, which is a state that I have been focused on, objected to, as an example of why people are concerned, millions of Americans concerned about our election integrity. The state of Pennsylvania, quite apart from allegations of any fraud, you have a state constitution that has been interpreted for over a century to say that there is no mail-in balloting permitted except for in very narrow circumstances. That's also provided for in the law. And yet, last year, Pennsylvania elected officials passed a whole new law that allows universal mail-in balloting.
Wait a minute.
And did it irregardless of what the Pennsylvania Constitution said.
He's coming back.
And then when Pennsylvania citizens tried to go and be heard on this subject before the Pennsylvania Supreme Court, they were dismissed on grounds of procedure, timeliness, in violation of that Supreme Court's own precedent. So the merits of the case have never been heard. The constitutionality of the statute actually has never been defended. I'm not aware of any court that has passed on its constitutionality. Actually, I'm not aware of anybody who's defended the constitutionality. And this was the statute that governed this last election, in which there are over 2.5 million mail-in ballots in Pennsylvania. This is my point, that this is the forum. The Pennsylvania Supreme Court hasn't heard the case. There's no other court to go to hear the case in the state. And so this is the appropriate place for these concerns to be raised,
yes,
which is why I have raised them here today.
Finally,
and I hope that this
someone
body will not miss the opportunity to take affirmative action to address the concerns of so many millions of Americans, to say to millions of Americans tonight that violence is never warranted, that violence will not be tolerated, that those who engage in it will be prosecuted, but that this body will act to
I think it's so stupid that they stormed the Congress. The timing of it was such a psyop, guys. How dumb, bad optics,
We
right?
need election security reforms. I bet my friends on the other side of the aisle don't disagree with that. We need to find a way to move forward on that together so that the American people from both parties, all walks of life, can have confidence in their elections and that we can arrange ourselves under the rule of law that we share together. Thank you, Mr. President. I yield the floor.
Democratic leader.
Senator from Pennsylvania, Mr. Casey.
Senator from Pennsylvania.
I rise tonight to defend the people of the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, to defend the more than 6.9 million voters who voted in this election.
That's what I say. The most exciting thing about this, besides the history of it, we are literally watching history. The exciting thing about this is, I don't know what they're going to say, if they're going to be object, if they're anti, you know.
And to condemn, in the strongest possible terms, this attempt to disenfranchise the voters of Pennsylvania based upon a lie, a falsehood. That same lie sowed the seeds of today's violence and today's lawlessness here in the Capitol. One of my constituents, Susan from the Lehigh Valley, the community of our state where Senator Toomey lives, recently wrote to my office and perhaps said it best. She said, and I quote, "We cannot allow anybody to overturn the legal votes of the citizens of Pennsylvania. This would be the ultimate destruction."
Okay, we know this guy's an idiot. Let's read a couple things before we get back into the stuff. Trump banned from Twitter. Next up, Central Communications blackout. That's what they're saying. So what did he say? Oh, no longer exists. They pruned this whole thread. There must be something good in here. This Anon says, doesn't matter anymore. People stormed the most central instrument American government system on live television. They entered the room, sat on the effing chair of the legislator of the most powerful imperial government in human history. The U.S. is done, this Anon is saying. It is a toothless old lion who has had a few more good swipes left before it kicks the bucket. Russia and China are probably salivating and making maps now, this Anon is saying. People responding. Remember, this is the entire world is waiting for America's downfall. America has a lot of enemies. A lot of enemies. Very interesting. Let's I can't click on it. Oh, we can. The 10th Mountain Division retweeted, "Back to the Battle of the Bulge. The counterpunch begins. January 4th, 1945. Patton launches an assault with 1st and 3rd Armies from the south across the waist of the Bulge at Hauf-Alise, north of Bastogne." History in the making. They posted something else. Patton hoped to make the 17-mile bound. 17, you know, that's their number, the Q number. Not even close. With bad roads, snow, fog mines, and blown bridges, the push took until January 15th. Maybe they're giving codes, like saying it wasn't done at the time they wanted. It's going to take a little longer. Who knows? Who knows? People are also saying it's not over till the 20th. These guys don't look like MAGA supporters. I mean, these guys, like the beards. I don't know about them back there, but little, you know, I get a little Antifa vibe from them. People are saying that this is a PED symbol from the declassified symbols. I don't know. Is it or is it not? Some people were saying it's a Viking LARP symbol, you know, like the Norse Aryan Viking symbol. I'm not quite sure. Let me know in chat what you guys think. What you think of that symbol. A lot of people are talking about that. Her name was Ashley Babbitt. People were saying it was Roberta Paulson. But medically, her name was not Roberta Paulson. It is Ashley Babbitt. We're going to go back to her in a minute. Let's take a look. Is he still talking?
There really should not be a...
You are a jerk. Okay, let's... She was in the Air Force. Okay, an Air Force veteran. Was shot through the Congress thing for some reason. We'll go back to this. Go back to that. Visanon is saying, unironically, the plan is in full detail. This is 5-dimensional chess. Horrid, what's going on? How you doing? We got to play some more Tarkov soon. That was fun. Donald Trump is a multi-billionaire who hit his power level from the establishment and became effing president. What happened today was exactly what Trump wanted. Scared the crap out of everyone. The fact that millions of people turned out for Trump and have lost faith in the system terrifies them. Trump has single-handedly delegitimized the entire mainstream media, big tech, and government in just 4 years. Before 2016, maybe 10% of the people knew that the news was fake and that the system was rigged. 4 short years after, and the effing country thinks the powers that be rigged the United States election, that the media is propaganda, that technocrats silence dissident to push their global narrative. The entire game of the elite is exposed, and half the country knows about it. In before MIGA, how does delegitimizing every institutional power in the eyes of the American people help people in power? This Anon is asking. He moved an effing embassy and does little favors to get them off his back. You say they control everything, yet you believe Trump can just name them and not expect to get JFK, this Anon is saying. It's called optics. So that word is that word is coming up a lot today because of the optics of storming the Capitol building, as we saw. And he is adding that Trump needs the military in the District of Columbia to finish what he started. In order to do this, there needs to be civil unrest or endangerment of state officials. Trump knew Pence would betray him. He was hinting at this the whole time. Let's go back and take a quick... Oh, we got to hear this guy.
In an unprecedented attack against our democracy.
We'll go back.
Fairly or not, they'll be remembered for their role in the shameful episode in American history. That will be their legacy. I salute Senator Langford and Loeffler and Braun and Daines, and I'm sure others, who in the light of today's outrage have withdrawn their objection. For any who remain insistent on an audit in order to satisfy the many people who believe that the election was stolen, I'd offer this perspective. No congressional audit is ever going to convince these voters, particularly when the president will continue to say that the election was stolen. The best way we can show respect for the voters who are upset is by telling them the truth. That's the burden. That's the duty of leadership. The truth is that President-elect Biden...
What is up with his face? It looks like Cyberpunk 2077. Looks like he has like circuitry in his face.
Won the election. President Trump lost. I've had that experience myself. It's no fun. Scores of courts, the president's own attorney general, state election officials, both Republican and Democrat, have reached that unequivocal decision. And in light of today's sad circumstances, I asked my colleague, do we weigh our own political fortunes more heavily than we weigh the strength of our republic? the strength of our democracy, and the cause of freedom? What's the weight of personal acclaim compared to the weight of conscience? Leader McConnell said that the vote today is the most important in his 36 years of public service. Think of that. Authorizing 2 wars, voting on 2 impeachments. He said that not because the vote reveals something about the election, it's because this vote reveals something about us. I urge my colleagues to move forward with completing the electoral count, to refrain from further objections, and to unanimously affirm the legitimacy of the presidential election. Thank you, Mr. President.
Democratic leader.
Senator from New Hampshire, Senator Shaheen.
Senator from New Hampshire.
Mr. President, on January 3rd, I, along with 31 of my colleagues, stood in this chamber and swore an oath to support and defend the Constitution of the United States.
Is it good?
It's both ironic and deeply disappointing that only 3 days after swearing these oaths, some of my colleagues are willfully coming close to breaking this promise.
I don't know.
Since 1797, each U.S. president has peacefully handed over power to the next.
Nope.
And that will happen again on January 20th when Donald Trump, despite the protesters today.
We'll see. We'll see. Where were we? Was breaking down this guy. Trump knew Pence would betray him. He was hinting at it the whole time. Even in his speech before storming the Capitol, Trump emphasized that it was all up to Pence and that he did not have a good feeling about it. If you watched carefully, he also said, "I haven't heard good things about Pence." This would place the seed in the voters' mind to get them angry enough at the betrayal to cause chaos. There is a reason why Trump said for everyone to march to the Capitol, but he went straight into the White House. Trump is telling his supporters to go home because he's about to unleash the military into D.C. via the Insurrection Act. This is exactly why he told his supporters to leave and stop being violent after about an hour of rioting. He didn't even disavow or heavily condemn the riots. He just gave a proclamation telling them to go home. That is all that is required to justify an Insurrection Act. It's effing happening, this Anon is saying. And if you don't trust the plan by now, you aren't going to make it. There's a reason why there are hundreds of military planes in the sky. We covered that on multiple shows, guys. Let me repeat, there are reasons. The past few months, there are hundreds of military planes in the skies. Remember Biden's broken leg. Where is Hunter? Think about it. Why would Twitter delete a tweet from Trump telling his own supporters to stop storming the Capitol? Wouldn't that be what they want? Twitter deleted Trump's proclamation telling his supporters to disperse because they know what it effing means. But it's too late for them. The proclamation was already made loud and clear. Let's see what else this Anon's saying. The shills are in full force after him. He's fighting back. I thought that was Donald Trump's book he wrote in 1924 by time travel called The Last Presidency, The Last President. So very interesting plan there. Congressman Lucy McBath calls for Vice President Pence to invoke the 25th Amendment and remove the president from office. Unfathomable. Let's go back and take a look. Karen is still upset.
We pointed out that the hallmark of a democracy, what he had worked so hard for in his 8 years as president of Georgia, the hallmark of that was...
Cover some more topics. People are saying the Civil War begins today. That it already began. This is the man that shot the woman. I don't know if it's him or him. I'm not quite sure. Here is an image of them barricading the doors, terrifying the rich and elite and powerful. And I do not condone violence or advocate for violence at all. I think it actually set us back because now they have their talking points. Now they have their PSYOP. And there's a lot of people promoting subtle, subconscious memes. But we need to find out what happens. We need to find out what the military is going to do, what Trump's going to do if it really is going to be the Insurrection Act. Is this part of their plan the whole time, to activate martial law? Or is this something that is only Trump's plan, to activate it and get rid of a lot of the bad people? So we don't know. We don't know. This woman's been talking for like 20 minutes.
I ask my colleagues today to fully endorse the results of the free and fair election and set aside this partisan attempt to subvert the will of the people. We should be venerating the peaceful transition of power, even if our own preferred candidate didn't win. That is, after all, who we are in the United States of America. Thank you, Mr. President.
You're playing music.
Majority Leader.
Mr. President, I yield up to 5 minutes to the Senator from Ohio, Senator Portman.
Senator from Ohio.
Mr. Vice President, you have fulfilled your duties as President of the Senate tonight with distinction, and we all appreciate it.
What's he going to say? What's he going to say? Corin said this is a coup. Yeah, it's a modern-day coup.
I thought about changing my mind and not speaking tonight, given the lateness of the hour, and I know all of my colleagues would have appreciated that greatly. But I felt it was necessary to speak.
Say something good.
Because I want the American people, particularly my constituents in Ohio, to see that we will not be intimidated, that we will not be disrupted from our work, that here in the citadel of democracy, we will continue to do the work of the people. Mob rule is not going to prevail here. Now, let's face it, we did not reclaim this chamber tonight. Brave and selfless law enforcement officers stood in the breach and ensured that the citadel of democracy would be protected and that we would be defended.
Yeah, it sounds like it, Crusaders.
And we are deeply grateful for that, as is the nation. I've listened carefully to the comments of my colleagues.
Horns.
And I've listened over the past couple of weeks as this issue has been discussed. And
I know they're glasses.
I tell you, for me, it's not a hard decision. I stand with the Constitution. I stand with what the Constitution makes clear. The people.
I don't have a Twitter, Eddie Forehand. Eddie Forehand, no Twitter.
And the states hold the power here, not us. My oath to the Constitution and my reverence for our democratic principles make it easy for me to confirm these state certifications. By the way, I posed this process some 15 years ago when some Democrats chose to object to the electors from my home state of Ohio after the 2004 elections. I opposed it then, and I oppose it now. I said,
yeah, he's an idiot. Let's go. Let's continue with the pictures. With the news. The real news. So a lot of agitators out there are talking about burning down cities. Well, this was not from tonight, is it? This is from Black Lives Matter, actually. It's amazing what they can get away with. Amazing. But that's why like the rules don't apply for them. They only apply for us. Don't you see now why it wasn't worth storming the Capitol today? Unless the military joins in, unless there is full-on people not taking it any longer and peaceful protesting. But Mike Pence refollowed Donald Trump. People are saying, I don't know if it's true. You have to understand that YouTube has the power to do whatever they want. Twitter has the power to do whatever they want. So Twitter could have unfollowed Pence from you-know-who. Antifa is trying to dox these people, I guess. I don't know what they're trying to say. So we're just going down thread here. The symbol on his chest, I don't think is the PED symbol. We have to look into that. I want someone to bring it up. I think it might be Norse Viking style stuff. But I've never heard of that guy before, and I've been doing this for a while. You would think that I would have heard of the MAGA Viking. What about this picture? This picture is summing up when the fall of Jerusalem by Rome. Very interesting that the memes are writing themselves. Listenon is saying, meet Trump's new senior advisor at the Pentagon, Douglas McGregor. Why would he hire a new Pentagon advisor? Pentagon's new senior advisor said politicians support Israel because they've been getting very, very rich from the Israel lobby, and called U.S. involvement in World War II a disaster, engineered by the left to get out of the Great Depression. Very interesting that Trump would hire this guy.
Objected to the results and distrusted the election.
Another 20-minute speech. This Anon is saying the screen record everything. Remember what happened last time on election night? They scrubbed everything from the internet. This is a reminder. Archive everything. This is to keep the record straight. Bystander effect warning. This is a warning. If you sneeze, you must record. Get the F in here and record everything. I'm recording C-SPAN actively. Archive everything. Mapping the everyday. Very cool cover. Space Boomer says, you guys need to read it. And link what? Makes more sense. Oh yeah, try to just space out the dot and don't put a comma in there. You could figure out a way to post it. I'm not stopping you from posting it. It's YouTube that's stopping you.
Our speech extemporaneously, but a 10-minute speech took immense preparation. I don't know what he would have said about a 4-minute speech. We are a 240-year anomaly in world history. We think that what we have here in this country is the way it's always been. It is a very unusual form of government. The normal form of government throughout world history is dictators, kings, czars, pharaohs, warlords, tyrants. And we thought 20 years ago the march of history was toward democracy, but it is in retreat in Hungary and Turkey. Goodness knows in Russia. Democracy as we have practiced it is fragile. It's fragile and it rests upon trust. It rests upon trust in facts. It rests upon trust in courts, in public officials, and yes, in elections. I don't sympathize or justify or in any way support, that's putting it mildly, what happened here today, but I understand it. I understand it because I saw those people interviewed today and they said, we're here because this election has been stolen. And the reason they said that is that their leader has been telling them that every day
what this guy's doing
for 2 months. We cannot afford to pull bricks out from the foundation of trust that
record everything. What a based anon. I like that information. Her name was Roberta Paulson. This is what propaganda conditioning look like. Okay. We all know those memes. Her real name, though, is Ashley Babbitt. And we don't know why she was shot, how it went down, if the guy shot her through the door. Yep, their scripts are running out. If anyone has some spicy riot footage, post it. We'll take a look at that. Because we're not going to know what
I think
what
this
these
is one of
idiots
the
do
most
till
important
tomorrow.
votes any of us will ever take. On December 1st, 1862, Abraham Lincoln came to this building. He came to this building in the darkest days of the Civil War. He was trying to awaken the Congress to the crisis that we were facing. And he didn't feel that they were fully and effectively engaged. And he ended his speech that day with words that I think have an eerie relevance tonight.
These guys are idiots.
Here's what Abraham Lincoln said. Fellow Americans, we cannot escape history. We of this Congress and this administration will be remembered in spite of ourselves. No personal significance or insignificance can spare one or another of us. And here's his final words. The fiery trial through which we pass will light us down in honor or dishonor to the latest generation. The fiery trial through which we pass will light us down in honor or dishonor to the latest generation. Thank you, Mr. President. I yield the floor.
Mr. President.
Senator from Maryland.
Thank you, Mr. President. The mob violence and attack we saw on our Capitol today should be a wake-up call to each and every one of us of what happens when we fail to come together, not as Democrats and Republicans, but each of us as Americans, to stand up to a president who...
So we see where this is going. We're done watching the joint sessions. I'm going to give you guys a couple scenarios of what's about to take place. This is Act 1 of the greatest show on earth. What does that mean? That truly we're not going to know what happens. The rhetoric that we heard today at the events and the rallies, to me it sounds like there is going to be a reckoning of the traitors, of people that sold out to China. So what scenario 1 is that scenario, the military takeover and draining of the swamp. That's what everyone's hoping for. But that's double-edged sword. It would involve martial law, this, that, and the other. That's a possibility if Trump just doesn't leave on the 20th and the military backs him. Another possibility is they paint all Trump supporters and right-wingers as domestic and violent terrorists. Biden brings in China to police America, to monitor the happenings, basically, of the right, to censor and silence the internet. That's scenario 2. That's the dark winter scenario. Scenario 3 is the all-out chance that if Trump does give up power, that he destroys the Republican and Democratic Party by creating his own third party that his sons would run in, he would run in. That's also a possibility of all this. That is like the peaceful outcome of this in terms of Biden winning peacefully. I really believe that we are going to see unprecedented times ahead in terms of military action, a retaking of the republic with the military, helping Trump, helping the American people. because at the bottom line, at the end of the day, this is a complete fraudulent election. The speeches that I heard today were so great and convincing that the government, the CIA, had to come in and riot and shut down the building. Because at the very least, states changed their laws unconstitutionally to aid the Democrats and Joe Biden to win, and mail-in votes to be counted and accepted, when mail-in votes were never accepted before. In many of these states that just recently changed the law. At the very least, it needs to be turned over, thrown out, and redone. So what's going to happen? Is there going to be more agitation? Probably. More color revolution? Probably. Will Antifa stage more events? Probably. What happened today, I think, was not good at all. Because now you see the scripts that these people already had written. These 4-minute, 5-minute, 10-minute speeches are not just, they didn't just write these in the last few hours while they were hiding in the bunkers, guys. Maybe the Netflix series will show that, but in reality, these speeches were written days ago, weeks ago. They knew this would happen. There's news that the DC mayor, they leaked in a national emergency something. They knew there was going to be a curfew. The curfew leaked early. Very, very crazy stuff. Staffer collected the electoral certificates during the evacuation, and chain of possession was broken. Certificates can no longer be certified. Certificates can no longer be certified. They are saying. Very interesting times. Let's see. Is there any good speeches before we go?
Senator from South
Carolina.
Carolina.
I go play Tarkov the rest of the night. And prepare.
Many times my state has been the problem.
God,
I love it. It's where I want to.
This guy's not good, right? He's pretty fanoikish.
Have a good relationship. I love Tim Scott. 1876, South Carolina, Louisiana, and Florida sent 2 slate of electors. They had 2 governments, by the way, and we didn't know what to do. Why did South Carolina, Florida, and Louisiana do it? To hold the country hostage.
I don't think Steve Bannon has said anything, Corrid. I don't know.
In Reconstruction. It worked. The commission was 8-7. It didn't work. Nobody accepted it. The way it ended is when Hayes did a deal with these 3 states. You give me the electors, I'll kick the Union Army out. The rest is history. It led to Jim Crow. If you're looking for historical guidance, this is not the one to pick. If you're looking for a way to convince people there was no fraud, having a commission chosen by Nancy Pelosi, Mitch McConnell, and John Roberts is not going to get you to where you want to go.
She looks like she sold out the American people. You can see the regret on her face.
It ain't going to work. So it's not going to do any good. It's going to delay, and it gives credibility to a dark chapter of our history. That's why I'm not with you. But I will fight to my death for you. You're able to object. You're not doing anything wrong. Other people have objected. I just think it's a uniquely bad idea to delay this election. Trump and I, we've had a hell of a journey. I hate it to end this way. Oh, my God, I hate it. From my point of view, he's been a consequential president. But today, first thing you'll see. All I can say is count me out. Enough is enough. I've tried to be helpful.
Whoa.
But when the Wisconsin Supreme Court ruled 4-3 that they didn't violate the Constitution of Wisconsin, I agree with the 3, but I accept the 4. If Al Gore can accept 5-4, he's not president. I can accept Wisconsin 4-3. Pennsylvania, it went to the Second Circuit. So much for all the judges being in Trump's pocket. They said, no, you're wrong. I accept the Pennsylvania Second Circuit that Trump's lawsuit wasn't right. Georgia, they said the Secretary of State took the law in his own hands. He changed the election laws unlawfully. A federal judge said, no, I accept the federal judge even though I don't agree with it. Fraud. They said there's 66,000 people in Georgia under 18 voted. How many people believe that? I asked, give me 10. Hadn't had one. They said 8,000 felons in prison in Arizona voted. Give me 10. Hadn't gotten one. Does that say there's problems in every election? I don't buy this. Enough's enough. We got to end it.
Traitors.
Vice President Pence, what they're asking you to do, you won't do because you can't.
Thank God for video games. I will take my aggression out and escape from Tarkov.
You talk about interesting times. I associate myself with Rand Paul. How many times will you hear that?
Lindsey
the
Graham,
mob has
the
done
rumor
something
is,
nobody...
listen, we don't care about sexuality on this show. I think it's highly immoral, highly degenerate. But hey, it's your choice. But this guy is rumored to have his finger in more rice bowls around Congress, more Senator pages around Congress.
What else could do to get me and Rand to agree? Rand is right. If you're a conservative, this is the most offensive concept in the world, that a single person could disenfranchise 155 million
I'm getting
people.
my mouse ready for Tarkov.
The President of the Senate shall, in the presence of the Senate and the House of Representatives, open all certificates, and the votes shall then be counted. The person having the greatest number of votes for president shall be president. Where in there does it say Mike can say, I don't like the results? I want to send them back to the states. I believe there was fraud. To the conservatives who believe in the Constitution, now's your chance to stand up and be counted. Originalism, count me in.
I wish someone would stand up and start objecting.
It means what it says. So, Mike, Mr. Vice President, just hang in there. They said we can count on Mike. All of us can count on the Vice President. You're going to do the right thing. You're going to do the constitutional thing.
What?
You got a son who flies F-35s. You got a son-in-law who flies F-18s. They're out there flying so that we can get it right here.
I hope
there are people
they,
dying.
Do a flyby tonight.
My good friend from Illinois, to make sure we
Lindsay's
have a chance
house.
to argue among ourselves, and when it's over, it is over. It is over. The final thing, Joe Biden. I've traveled the world with Joe. I hoped he lost. I prayed he would lose. He won. He's the legitimate president of the United States.
Oh, Lord.
I cannot convince people, certain groups, by my words, but I will tell you by my actions, that maybe I, above all others in this body, need to say
all
this.
should be fired.
Joe Biden and Kamala Harris are lawfully elected and will become the president and the vice president of the United States on January the 20th.
I don't think so. I think something major is going to happen.
Majority Leader.
Mr. President, I yield back the balance of our time.
All time has expired.
Unbelievable.
The question is, shall the objection submitted by the gentleman from Arizona, Mr. Gosar, and the senator from Texas, Mr. Cruz, and others, be sustained?
Ted fucking Cruz, guys. What a redemption arc. Ted Cruz. What about, how come he didn't mention Lauren Boebert? She objected. Is he just going over the people he heard?
Is there a second? There is. Clerk will call the roll.
Ms. Baldwin. Mr. Barrasso. Mr. Bennett.
Everyone who objects?
Mrs. Blackburn. Mr. Blumenthal. Mr. Blunt. Mr. Booker. Mr. Bozeman.
Who's going to object?
Mr. Braun. Mr. Brown. Mr. Burr. Ms. Cantwell. Mrs. Capito. Mr. Cardin. Mr. Carper.
A lot of no's.
Mr. Casey.
We need a yes.
Mr. Cassidy. Ms. Collins. Mr. Coons. Mr. Cornyn.
Mr. Cruz.
Ms. Cortez Masto. Mr. Cotton. Mr. Kramer. Mr. Crapo. Mr. Cruz. Mr. Daines. Ms. Duckworth. Mr. Durbin. Ms. Ernst. Mrs. Feinstein. Mrs. Fisher. Mrs. Gillibrand. Mr. Graham. Mr. Grassley. Mr. Haggerty. Ms. Harris. Ms. Hassan. Mr. Holy. Mr. Heinrich. Mr. Hickenlooper. Ms. Hirono. No. Mr. Hoven. I got excited. Mrs. Hyde-Smith. Mr. Inhofe. Mr. Johnson. Mr. Kane. Mr. Kelly. Mr. Kennedy. Mr. King.
Mr. Kennedy said aye.
Ms. Klobuchar. Mr. Lankford. Mr. Leahy.
Mr. Leahy.
Mr. Lee. Mrs. Loeffler.
These are all.
Mr. Lujan.
What was that?
Ms. Lummis. Mr. Manchin. Mr. Markey. Mr. Marshall. Mr. McConnell. Mr. Menendez. Mr. Merkley. Mr. Moran. Ms. Murkowski. Mr. Murphy. Mrs. Murray. Mr. Paul. Mr. Peters.
Rand Paul is a slime bag.
Mr. Portman. Mr. Reed. Mr. Risch. Mr. Romney. Ms. Rosen. Mr. Rounds. Mr. Rubio. Mr. Sanders. Mr. Sass. Mr. Schatz. Mr. Schumer. Mr. Scott of Florida. Mr. Scott of South Carolina. Mrs. Shaheen. Mr. Shelby. Ms. Sinema. Ms. Smith. Ms. Stabenow. Mr. Sullivan. Mr. Tester. Mr. Thune. Mr. Tillis. Mr. Toomey. Mr. Tuberville.
What happens after this? I can't wait.
Mr. Van Hollen.
With the V's.
Mr. Warner. Ms. Warren. Mr. Whitehouse.
Mr. Whitehouse.
Mr. Wicker. Mr. Wyden. Mr. Young.
Captain Titus Frost, is that really your account? I thought I made you a mod here. Is that a new channel? Yeah, let's see what happens now. They muted. You just hear rumbling. Black Eagle, this is it. They're voting on who objects, who's objecting. And only about 4 or 5 of them objected. Yeah. Oh my God. Captain Frost. That's fucked. YouTube is so horrible. Imagine caring about you. Imagine caring about being a moderator on YouTube. We had someone today that quit the show because he's not a moderator anymore. On YouTube. Uh-oh. They muted again. It's like, it's so fake. Like this guy here, it's like we're watching like a fake central casting. Like, what really is this guy doing, huh? Yeah, Black Eagle, you missed it. It was epic. So what we're witnessing here is who is spineless, who works for China. Rand Paul is spineless. Rand Paul is a traitor. Most 98% complete spineless. They want to invoke the 25th Amendment on Trump. There is looting and pillaging in the streets. It's like, where's Waldo? Oh my God. Will this happen? Twitter did remove POTUS. Will there be communications blackout? I mean, we're going to find out. I don't know. I know that. I don't think it's over yet, really. I have an ominous feeling like this is like right with like in the movie Titanic. Right when the ship goes all the way up and it's sticking up in the air, and then it just stops for a minute, everything's calm. Maybe it'll just stay there. Maybe it'll stay floating, you know, as long as we can hold on and get used to this new position. And then the ship just starts sinking and everyone's jumping off. The ship breaks in half. The breaking in half point is not the traitoring. The breaking in half point is if Trump invokes the Insurrection Act, if the military gets called in. What does continuity of government think? They're the ones really in charge right now, below the ground. Continuity of government's underground right now, having their own committee and TV party watching this. Mike Pence. I am now agreeing with all the rumors I've heard of Mike Pence. I've given him the benefit of the doubt too long. Mike Pence is...
On this vote, the yeas are 6, the nays are 93. The objection is not sustained. The Secretary will notify the House of the action of the Senate, informing that body that the Senate is now ready to proceed to joint session with further counting of the electoral vote for President and Vice President. Majority Leader.
Mr. President. So, colleagues, here's where we are. We have a few more speakers now as we wait for the House to finish their debate.
Let me just say that how big of a joke of a job this is. These people don't do anything except pomp and ceremony. This is hard for them to stay up late and eat chicken wings and pizza and discuss American politics.
And vote.
Look at these people.
Expect the House to finish voting on Arizona between 11:30 and midnight. I ask unanimous consent the Senate be in a period of morning business with the following senators permitted to speak therein for up to 5 minutes each. Senator Toomey, Senator Rubio, Senator Collins.
And on our side, Senators Wyden, Hirono, and Coons.
Finally, following their remarks, the Senate stand in recess subject to the call of the chair.
Hey, we're not going to watch this all night.
Maybe not.
We're going to pick up tomorrow, and when the dust settles, after we find out what's going on. We've been live for an hour and 45 minutes. This, all we do know is this is history. What occurred today at the Capitol is being used now in a scripted manner that they had scripts written for weeks in advance. The violence, how horrible Trump supporters are, how violent this was, unprecedented violent. Like, they got all the scripts written. They all need to be fired. I agree. Every single one of them, except the 6 people that said yes to objection. They can keep their jobs. This is the modern day royalty. We're living in modern day France when they're eating cake and all the peasants can barely eat bread. They're not eating anything except gruel. They shut down business. They're making people destitute. People are moving into RVs, selling their homes, stopping renting. They can't live in a place without a roommate. Now is the time to decide the fate of America. And how that happens is the people that are listening behind the scenes, the so-called white hats, they have to stand with the president on whatever that administration decides. The administration that just appointed a new head of the Pentagon. Why would they do that if he's on his way out? I don't know. And even if he is on his way out, I gave you multiple scenarios of what could possibly take place. One of them is Trump forming a whole new party and decimating these guys, you know, voting people out like they're talking about. Another scenario is Biden activates Chinese peacekeepers to come in and get all the domestic terrorists, aka Trump supporters, Baked Alaska supporters, and Nick Fuentes supporters. Because now we've all been labeled domestic terrorists by the mainstream media when Antifa and BLM can go out and cause as much havoc as possible. It's pretty radical.
Function.
He concluded, no matter how you voted, this election was administered with integrity, transparency.
So we're not listening to them anymore. I'm actually exiting the window. I'm giving you guys one final bit of hope. I don't want you to take today and what happened as every single person up there was a psyop, a paid actor, crisis actor. The enemy coaxes and coerces big groups of people, herd mentality, crowd mentality. All it takes is one celeb to say, charge. They get in, you know. And then if you look at the video footage, besides the breaking of the windows, okay? Can anyone red pill me on what actual violence took place besides a DC police officer shooting an unarmed woman? Horrible. She's dead now. What violence occurred? I saw videos of Trump supporters, evidently, walking through the hallway like it was a tourism attraction. There was no looting. There was no rioting, no burning. I didn't see this grand violence that people were talking about. So again, I don't know. I think this was an FF event today, a minor false scale optics event that was planned to get the mainstream media to discuss the enemy that they have, which is the truthers, the Trump people. I will be back in the next couple days. We will be covering this fully, where we picked up, monitoring what's going to happen in the next couple days. What is Trump going to do? Trump has already crossed the Rubicon. Today's speech. He's not conceding. He hasn't conceded yet. Stoner on D-Live says he watched the whole thing. A cop punched a guy first outside before the president led them there. Nothing compared to Antifa violence. That in like Senate and Congress, they're all shaking in their boots. How come they weren't scared when cities were shut down? When literal autonomous zones were set up in major cities? That didn't frazzle them. But today really, really scared them. It seems like it's a psyop. There is a curfew in DC right now. It's chaos. Stay safe out there. We will find out what happens on the 20th. I don't think it's over yet, really, I don't. I feel like there is something else brewing behind the scenes. And we shall see. But other than that, have a great rest of your night. I'll be back tomorrow, possibly. Stay tuned. Stay based. Have a great rest of your night.